Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt.
And I'm Denny Dumas.
And this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast.
Something we see often, and some agents do it fantastically well, and others have room for improvement, Jamie, is defending an offer, or at least communicating effectively to defend an offer and we're talking from the buy side. If you have a buyer write an offer on a property, there are a few kind of things that we try to do with every single offer to, defend our price point, educate the seller on who the buyer is, and just kind of, rather than email with no information, just here's an offer, good luck. Try to explain the offer, defend where we're coming from, and what kind of tools and what we look at to defend offers. This topic kind of came up, one, because I think we've kind of developed through a lot of experience a pretty good way of doing this, and also the frustrations that we deal with occasionally with receiving offers that are maybe not done as well as we think they should be. I guess that was a long intro, but tried to sum up a big topic.
No, I think it was great.
Yeah.
It's an important topic. It's one thing to evaluate a property, and then it's another one to, I guess, support your offer price and have a good message that get the message across in a way that's effective.
Yeah. Even just as a buyer's agent, you want to build some rapport with the listing agent early on in that negotiation. You don't want the listing agent to feel like you're against them. You want to have them feel like they're on the same team, that, we're working towards this common goal of, seller selling their property, buyer getting the property. So just sending an offer with no information whatsoever, and a low number with no defense, with no real data to back it up, immediately as a listing agent, you just kind of think, we're not going to really take this very seriously. Whereas if it's followed up with a phone call and just say, hey, I know it's probably a little lower than what your seller's expecting. These are the reasons that my client's coming in at this number. There was 3 sales that we looked at. Here they are, whatever. But I guess that is what... an important point that I think a lot of people overlook is that it's advantageous to you as a buyer's agent to communicate well with the listing agent to help them help them work with your offer at least.
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about, one, the instance where you're just firing off the offer with no information in the email. Let's say that happens because agents are very busy in that day and they're on the go. Step one is just pick up the phone and have a phone call. If you can't put down a well thought out message on an email with the offer, get it verbally. I understand that every day is different and every situation is different. But I feel, and we both, I think, agree with this, is that message is crucial because the agent needs to have something to go back to the sellers with.
Yeah.
And one comment I was going to make in terms of a well-formulated email to defend the offer. Yes, past sales and past recent comparable sales are the best evidence to justify an offer, assuming that your offer is in line with those past recent sales. But I like to kind of formulate a message that not only defends it with past sales, if my offer does make sense that way, but also in a way that the agent could forward to the client if they choose to.
Yeah.
So if the email, I guess what I'm saying is just when I'm formulating that email and putting my evidence together and putting my argument together, I'm also putting my thought as how would the seller receive this if they read it directly? And so I think that's important to mention because oftentimes the agent is the messenger, and I want to make it easy for that message to get to the seller without too many filters changing the message, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What things do you want to avoid in that communication right away?
Well, it depends on the situation of the offer. So maybe let's talk about a situation. What would be like, What would be the situation?
Well, let's use a one-on-one negotiation first, then we can talk about multiples. Okay. But let's say in the last month, let's say in the middle of April, there's a property that was on the market for 30 days, hasn't seen an offer yet. Your client writes an offer. What are you avoiding in that email?
What am I avoiding in that email? I am only putting sales that justify the offer price. I am not putting sales that don't.
Yeah.
I never reference assessed values, so even, no, I don't think I'd ever reference assessed values. I try to be as likable and pleasant and respectful in the message as possible. And if it's a one-on-one negotiation, 30 days on market, I like to create a sense of we have other options. So here's our offer price. Here's why. Here's where we're coming from. We hope you understand. We hope you respect the offer and take it. If not, we'll move on. And even if we don't move on, I think it's important to have a strong message, and then you leave it up to the buyer to decide how firm they are on it if they don't respond well. But
so one of the first things I said as a buyer's agent, I think it's really important to build a little bit of rapport with the listing agent. And one of the things that frustrates me the most as a listing agent is a buyer's agent right away bringing up assessed value. That is one of the main frustrations that we deal with, especially in slower markets. And in the last couple of months, it was used a lot. With no evidence of sales, no real research done on a neighborhood. It was just, here's an offer. It's above assessed value. This is a really good offer. And you're like, it's $250,000 less than the list price, which is priced at land value. So I want to be careful when talking about assessed values. I know a lot of maybe inexperienced real estate public, that's the only number they see. That's the only number they're given on their home. If you've been in your home for 25 years, that's the only number that is given to you every year by someone that shows something of a value. You're taxed on that, so you would assume that that number is somewhat accurate. It's not. It's all over the place. There's no correlation between market value and assessed value. We've sold homes 15, 20% above and below assessed value in the same year, in the same month. It's all over the place. So from a listing agent perspective, it's very frustrating when that's the only defense you're using for your, let's say, lower offer. Put a little bit of time and effort into researching a neighborhood and use sales to back it up. I'm never going to get mad at someone for using sales to back up a low offer, or I'm not going to get frustrated with them if they're reasonable sales. If something's sold in the neighborhood for the number that they're offering and the houses are similar, like, I'm not going to get frustrated at that. I probably have seen that sale and I probably understand that's coming. But to solely use an assessed value, I think just shows a little bit of laziness or inexperience.
Obviously, if it defends your price, there's some logic why a buyer's agent would use it. But as a realtor, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean much. It doesn't. BC assessments can't possibly accurately assess all properties in BC. It's just not feasible. And we constantly run into cases where assessments are out of whack. Mm-hmm. We have a listing for a condo in Victoria Hill right now, and the BC assessment is the same as the last sale. And it's the same as the last sale because it's the same size unit. But the last sale didn't have an unobstructed view of the water, and our unit does. And so BC assessment doesn't know the view of the place. BC assessment often doesn't know the renos or upgrades to a property. And for example, for a lot of condos, if you're the first buyer in, you might be getting a better deal than the last buyer in. But when the building completes, it all completes at the same time. And so BC assessment doesn't know if you paid $500,000 for a place that another buyer paid $600,000 for, that's the same because they bought it a few months later and it completes at the same time. I imagine that throws their data out of whack as well. So, there's a lot of reasons to be, there's a lot of reasons why BC assessment isn't the most accurate. But the best, my thought is from a buyer's agent side, if you want to put substance behind the offer, you have to resort to sales. And if the sales don't defend your offer price, leave them out, leave the assessment out, and just resort to your buyer's situation. And if the sales, and my thought here is that you're on a one-on-one negotiation and you have a little bit of power. I mean, if you're in a multiple offer situation, you're going in low, don't have high expectations. But if you're in a one-on-one situation going in low and the sales don't justify it, my thought is, the support there is to pump how solid the buyer is financially, if they are, and that this is their price, this is what they want to pay, and they're willing to take the leap on it at this point in time if you take this offer. And if you don't take this offer, they'll move on. And yeah, it's okay not to justify an offer with sales when times are bad. I imagine there's some luxury properties that are getting hit hard right now, that if the offers were coming off of sales from 2017, 2016, 2018, maybe even in some cases, they'd probably look pretty bad compared to those sale prices. So yeah, I think we should address that. There are circumstances, Denny, where in a down market or in a product that's suffering, you don't need to have sales to back up the offer. You can say, here it is, take it or leave it.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think the next step in a one-on-one negotiation, yes, we're including sales, maybe a link to a few properties that we are kind of looking at as a value. Like you mentioned, if the offer is in line with recent sales, the next step is just kind of like explaining what you're looking at in those specific properties. So say I'm using this property because of the lot size. It looked like it was pretty much land value. So I'm taking land value from this property and it sold for X. Then I'm looking at this property because it has a 2-bedroom suite. Your home has a 2-bedroom suite, similar type layout, size, and updates. So I'm looking at this home as house value and I'm putting them together, kind of thing. That's kind of the next step to give listing agent an idea of what you're looking at in those properties and where those numbers are coming from. And like you said, Jamie, that is just ammo, whatever the right word is, to go to a seller and just say, this is the reason for this offer.
Absolutely. And I think the notes you're just making there, the different ways to evaluate a property, particularly with detached, because it can be challenging at times, is the conversation you should be having with your buyer anyway.
Yeah.
So when you're having that, when you're doing that research, when you're coming up with multiple ways to get to a value, like, for a detached home, maybe, we just sold a 100-year-old home in Queen's Park. It's not the easiest product to evaluate if you don't know structure value, land value, and how it, compares to the latest sales. I mean, if you're going into it blind without seeing the latest sales, you're going to be guessing.
Yeah.
And so, it's important for you to know how much a structure is worth, how much land is worth when it comes to detached. And even in markets like the North Shore or West Van, I mean, there's flat lots and lots on a steep slope in the same great neighborhood. And I imagine that steep slope lot is much less valuable than a flat lot or a view lot. Well, steep slopes usually come with views. But you're going to put the work into for your buyer. So you might as well use that work and skew the message to sell the listing agent and the seller as well.
For sure. Let's shift a little bit and talk about multiples, because I think we're going to see that quite often in the next few months. How does that email, that first phone call, when you know that you're competing with something, how does that information that you provide the seller and the listing agent change?
Oh, it changes quite a bit.
It's totally different. It's a totally different communication.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to do a little defending of price with past sales, but quite frankly, if you're in multiple offer situation, you're not competing against the seller. You're competing against the other buyers. So, logical. It's nice to say, here's our offer and why. But they're going to be more concerned about if your offer has subjects or no subjects and what your buyer's like if they do have subjects.
Yeah.
So, I feel that if you're in a multiple offer situation and everyone has subjects, I think, maybe a quick note on why you're offering that might be nice. But it's more important to emphasize who your buyers are, particularly if they're a young family or, you can pull some emotional cords there. And, you basically want to give them confidence. So I like the sell the buyer on the human element. They're good people. Share who the buyer is and what their intent is with the home, and then also you want to give peace of mind financially, and potentially in some cases with older homes, where you may have a lot of collapse deals from inspection. If you are a seasoned agent and better able to prepare your buyers for what the likely items they'll run into in an inspection based on how the showing went, what you saw, having those kind of messages in an email or in a conversation with a listing agent has really helped me. And what I mean by that is if I have a buyer offering in multiple offer situations on an older home, and that older home has knob and tube wiring, has, maybe it's old foundation, no drain tile, unfinished basement, evidence of moisture, I would be prepping my buyer for all these items that may come up. And I would also be in the offer to the seller. I would say, we've already had the discussion that we're aware of these potential issues with the home and we still love it and we still want to proceed. Because if I were on the other side of that, that would give me more confidence that the buyer's aware of this stuff and they're still offering this price, as opposed to just coming in blind and they might make a fuss of it after inspection.
For sure.
Did that make sense? I don't know if that was clear.
Yeah. I think I just want to expand a little bit on, you mentioned talking about the strength of the buyer. And so what does that mean and how to kind of relay that to a listing agent? One, maybe talk about the communication that you've had with their mortgage person. So say, I've chatted with their mortgage person today. They are, you can say the word pre-approved, although it doesn't mean a ton, but to a seller, it might mean something. They're pre-approved. They're, financially really strong. Get your buyer's permission for this next item, but like sharing their careers, sharing their jobs, saying like, she is a nurse, he is a contractor, whatever, just to show that, they have consistent, good paying jobs, whatever it may be, to put them a little bit ahead of the next offer. If an offer comes in that's very similar and you've done a really good job of explaining who your client is, their financial situation, that they're comfortable doing renovations or they plan to do renovations like Jamie just mentioned, and the next offer comes in and it's identical and it has no explanation, no idea who the buyers are, no idea what their financial situation is, and they're similar, I would say 99% of the time your offer is getting picked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even, let's kind of talk about if the offers are the same and you're on the listing side and both of them aren't presented equal, because we've run into many cases where we've been staring at two identical offers.
Yeah.
And in some cases, a lot of times these offers might have subjects. If you're staring at two identical offers with both subjects, how are you determining between the two?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'm kind of leading in with that is you're looking at all these things, these things you're talking about, who the buyers are. And if there's we always recommend put a letter with the offer when you're in multiples. But if say there's just none of that, if we have nothing to look at, oftentimes, Denny, we're looking at the realtors, aren't we? We're looking at
100%.
If one realtor is more prominent than the other, we would just assume that realtor would be more likely to work with a solid buyer. So if you're not a prominent realtor out there, it is more important for you to have those supporting extras that will make the seller fall in love with your buyer. And then, aside from the job that your buyer has, because I think you made a good point there, registered nurse, doctors, those lawyers, those always sound solid financially. But I think it's always nice to kind of mention, like if a buyer has 35% down or putting 50% down, mention that. That's solid. If they have less than 20% down, maybe leave it out.
Yeah.
But I think the down payment percentage is important. I think if they have flexibility on dates, it's important to mention that. If they have realistic expectations, as I mentioned, the inspection results or whatever that is, like the likely items that will come up in inspection, and that's mention to them, mention that. And then you and I have both been on the end where it's been a nice family photo with a nice message that was the decision maker. Mm-hmm. And so is there anything else that comes to mind when it comes to multiples?
Well, often when you're buying entry-level single-family home, for example, that seller has been there for 10, 15, 20 years. And so the home it means a lot to them. And so even just tugging at those heartstrings and sharing what your buyer loves about the home. So, John and Katie, they have a 3-year-old daughter. They absolutely love the backyard and the way it's landscaped. They see themselves playing soccer and riding their bikes on the street all the time with their daughter. Like, just explaining what features of the home your buyer loves, because likely that's going to, affect an emotional connection with the seller, right? Mm-hmm. Or saying, we really appreciate that new kitchen. It's ideal for entertaining, and, John and Katie love to have their friends and family over, whatever.
Oh, you love my new kitchen? I put so much work into that, Denny.
Yeah.
See? You told me. I want you to buy the place.
I know you too well, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, people are human, and they want good people to live in their home, especially if they've been there for 20, 30 years. Not all the time, but I think that's great. I think that's definitely worth mentioning. On the multiple side, I think the other thing is just for the buyer's agent. I mean, we've talked about this before, but communication's key. You talked about building rapport early. Once the offer is sent, do those little nudges. How are we looking? Any updates? Anything that gives you information after that offer is out there before they make the decision, before they sign on the dotted line. I mean, some listing agents will just ghost you and not give you anything, but there's no harm in trying, because if you find that at any point in time that you're not in the running, you want to quickly phone your client and let them know and see if they're going to make any changes before the sellers sign another offer.
Yeah. And even just having that communication early, like you mentioned, if you're not a prominent agent, if you're newer to the industry and, you're working with a listing agent that you've never met before, have that communication early, asking them, how do you typically deal with multiples? I know we're going to be competing. I'm going to get you an offer by 5 p.m. Are you going to let me know how many you finally receive? Should I give you a call at 5:30 to see how many you have? Can you let me know right away once I send the offer if, we're looking good, if, there's 3 offers that blow us out of the water. So like prying for a little bit of information even before you send the offer to understand how the listing agent is going to deal with multiples. And then after the offer is sent, definitely sending those little nudges. It's a fine line though, because in multiples, especially when there's 6, 7, 8 offers, it can be very stressful for listing agents. Especially ones that, don't sell 50 homes a year. And this is like, they haven't seen multiple offers in a year and a half because the market was quite slow in 2019. The fine line of staying top of mind, being communicative, but also not stressing them out too much.
This is the Denny hack when it comes to multiple offers. Bring a notebook and write down the offer, the agent, the contact info on one sheet of paper. Organize everything on one sheet of paper and do updates on one sheet of paper. Otherwise, you'll lose track if you're dealing with multiple emails, multiple messages, all on different platforms and different mediums.
Yeah.
So that is crucial if you're in that zone of, say, north of 4 offers.
And just to describe that piece of paper, for me, it is literally name of agent with their phone number underneath, their price, their dates, and whether they have subjects or not. So as soon as, and this happened like in 2016, 17, we would have multiple offers going on the same evening, Monday at 5 p.m., Monday at 6 p.m., Monday at 7 p.m. And so when agents would call you, it'd be unknown numbers. And, there was times, Jamie, where we had 3 offer presentations on one night, and there was maybe, let's say 5 offers. So we're dealing with 15 offers at a time. So when someone calls me, I see their phone number. I know exactly what property they wrote on. I know exactly what offer they have without scrolling through emails, because I just, I took the extra 3 minutes to write it down. So that really, really helped organize for me.
And that sheet gets updated throughout the night in the negotiation too.
Exactly.
So, as people improve their price on a round 2 or improve their subjects, you're crossing them out, making the adjustments, and it's all on one sheet. Yeah. And I mean, this is, this is a blessing if you're in this position where you have to organize offers this way. But I mean, it's a little simple tip, but it is very effective because it can get overwhelming.
Totally. It's an opportunity to show value to the seller too, right? If you're organized and you communicate well with buyer's agents, you can get better results. So
Absolutely.
Doing these little extra things, sure, maybe it's a little bit more time out of your day. Maybe making all those phone calls is a little bit uncomfortable. Calling agents back and just letting them know they're not in the lead, whatever those conversations are like. But that's part of our service. That's part of our value. Yeah. That's why people hire us.
Comfortable calls. Yeah. The more of those calls you make, the better you get at them. But yeah, it's part of our job. We are messengers at the end of the day, but we have to deliver good news and bad news. And I think we have to be respectful and timely in the way that we do it. And it is frustrating when you have an offer, you're in a multiple offer situation and you get no feedback from the listing agent and you don't find out until the next day that it's sold. And maybe the winning offer wasn't much better than yours at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so many different agents out there. Everyone deals with them differently. There's times where you can do everything right and still have a poor outcome, just simply because of who's on the other end. And you can't control that.
I remember one time, and I don't remember who the listing agent was, but this was a couple of years ago, but props to the listing agent just for being honest and communicating well. We had an offer on a house in Coquitlam, 1.25, no subjects, dates that the seller wanted. He called me back fairly shortly and said, Denny, you're going to hate me. I'm really sorry about this. One of the other buyers is a friend of, or like a friend's daughter of the seller. And so your offer is much higher. When you see the sale price, you're going to be very frustrated. But I unfortunately have no say, and the seller wants to work with that person specifically. So rather, like, if he just accepted that offer and I saw the sale price a couple days ago or a couple days after, I'd be so mad, so frustrated. But just the fact that you're honest with people, it goes a long way. And like, it turned that experience, which could have been very negative, especially trying to help a buyer understand why their offer was not picked, even though it was $100,000 higher, versus just being honest and saying, unfortunately, you didn't have a shot from the beginning because of this relationship behind the scenes that we obviously didn't have.
Yeah. We've been delivering that news in the past as well.
Yeah.
One scenario we haven't talked about is, we talked about multiples. We talked about the one-on-one negotiation with the listing that's been on market for a bit. Let's talk about the listing that just hit. Uncertain times. I want that place. It's day one on market. It's priced a little bit higher than I'd like to pay, but I want it. How are you prepping the buyers or from a buyer's agent standpoint? My thought is, we don't know what's around the corner. So if a buyer wants a listing and it's 2 days on market, it is what it is. You don't have that negotiation leverage of a listing that's struggling. So that's out the door. So all you really have is the price that you put on paper in the sales that happened recently that are comparable to justify that price.
Yeah.
But what things come to mind when that new listing hits and it's uncertain times and you're the buyer's agent?
Yeah, so this is known as the bully offer, Jamie.
The bully offer. Yes, I guess it would be the bully offer.
The bully offer. Yeah. This is the bully offer. Yeah,
bully offer.
Like from a listing agent perspective, it better be a good. It better be a good offer. Yeah. Sorry.
How do you explain the bully offer, just so that people don't? We're not missing people on this one.
Yeah, this to me happens more often in active climbing markets, often in slower markets, or during this past couple months during COVID. We didn't really see this a lot. Buyers were a lot more hesitant and would wait more time to write offers and to see properties. But let's say if we think this summer is going to be as busy as we think it's going to be, I think this will start happening more and more. If your buyer has missed out on a couple of properties and they see something list and they want it right away, if there's no direction of offers, if there's no, hey, we're taking offers next Monday at 6 p.m., Right. It needs to be a strong offer to entice a seller not to go through with that first weekend of showings or open houses if they come back. It better be strong. Whether it's subject free or not, that's up to the buyer to see how strong they want to go in. If it's not subject free, it better be a short subject window. The most frustrating thing seeing an offer early from a listing agent perspective is like a long subject removal and not having the opportunity to market and show the property that first week. So if you're a buyer and you're in a position where you've lost a couple and you want to send a bully offer, you want this property wrapped up prior to that first weekend, it needs to be a strong number, list price or above in many circumstances, unless it's priced really high. But if it's priced in line with recent sales, it needs to be a strong offer. It needs to be either a short subject window or no subjects to entice a seller to take it early. And I think all those other factors come into play too. You know, from a buyer's agent perspective, educating the seller and the listing agent on who your client is. So, you know, my clients are young couples. They've sold their condo. They need to be out of their condo. And then, you know, in 60 days, they've missed out on the last couple homes due to multiple offers. And, you know, we've been really close and they've been really disappointed. This is an ideal home for them. They love the backyard. They love the layout. You know, they really appreciate having that income suite downstairs. And, you know, they wanted to send you a really strong offer early in hopes that, you know, we could work together early.
I'm going to just kind of elaborate on a couple little things. Bully offer is a term that you can use when the offer is good, not bad. You know, so if it's a new listing and you've just hit and you're offering early and it's, you know, not even close to the list price and has long subjects, that's just a quick offer. That's not necessarily a bully offer. So in these instances Denny's referring to with the short subject removal, the strong price, the pricing strategy is not like, I wouldn't go into it, hey, here's our starting offer, but we're willing to negotiate up. The bully offer is, here's our top price, put your best price on the table in hopes that they take it so that someone else doesn't buy it. I mean, we are specifically referring to a situation where you feel that you're going to lose the property or get in a multiple offer situation if it goes another week. Yeah. So, you know, aside from having a strong price, having a quick subject removal, trying to have an offer that expires, say, before an open house, trying to get the seller to deal with it prior to the first weekend. I mean, that's important. Feeling out the listing agent is key too. I mean, for a skilled, experienced agent that's behind many multiple offer situations, subjects is important. But I mean, I've been surprised so many times where the realtor or seller didn't really mind subjects. So there are genuinely some cases where you might be able to get away with a good offer early at a strong price, but still have lots of time to do your due diligence because you ask the right questions to the listing agent prior to that offer. Yeah. So, you know, and then what I mean by that, some people are purely sale price focused and don't necessarily concern themselves too much about subjects. Mm-hmm. However, when we're in that position, we definitely concern ourselves about subjects because we've been behind so many collapsed deals. And so every situation needs to be evaluated based on how many days the market's been, how many days on market it has, what the product is. And, you know, have you met your first opening weekend yet? I mean, that's from a seller standpoint, that's a big leverage point. You know, from a buyer standpoint, you don't want them to get that first weekend, but from the seller standpoint, you do. So, you know, those are just kind of the things that come to mind is timing of the offer. I guess just being as pleasant and likable as possible so that they look at your offer early and consider it.
Yeah.
Well, right. Denny, I can't think
that's pretty good. Yeah. Let's wrap this one up. Listeners out there, if you took any value from this, we would love to hear from you. Write us a review, send us a DM. If you've got topics that you want to hear us chat about and our experiences with, shoot us a message. We would love some more ideas.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out.